Imagine this. Seasoned actors and improvisers gather around a table with microphones and play a role-playing game.
But not Dungeons and Dragons. No, they play their own formats and systems, or ones where the rules are streamlined and easy to follow, much like an improv game.
Now, imagine these games with all their zany jokes and character quirks and ridiculous encounters, but imagine them realized, embellished, fleshed out, activated, and brought to life so that you hear everything as it unfolded in the performers' heads.
Sound intriguing, interesting, impossible even? Don't answer.
Welcome to 20-Sided Stories, an improvised role-playing podcast.
I'm Jessica.
I'm Travis.
I'm Emily.
I'm David.
And I'm Sage, and with immersive sound design, an original music score, and full ensemble casts of voice talent, we're going to take you into a variety of familiar worlds and genres, changing every season with an original story and brand new characters to meet, all woven together on the spot.
It's the comedy of an improv podcast, but with a cohesive, complete story.
Yeah, you can't definitely not
Attack
screw
it!
this up.
Why? Beat it up!
Why?
Because it's a bird! You gotta hurt
You gotta
this
hurt
animal!
it and so that you can capture it and he's yours.
Is that what the plan is?
You gotta catch
Enslave
him all.
that animal!
My God!
It's the adventure of an actual play podcast, but you feel like you're right there with us.
We don't have time. We have to get to the Green Chapel now.
You idiots are traveling too slowly for adventuring.
I have a 5'2" man on my back at all times.
Steph, get off of her back and do your own walking.
One of your steps is like 4 of mine.
Then you better giddy up, haven't you?
All right, fine. You have to tell me if something's coming. I can't see over tree lines.
Can somebody get him some stilts?
Make me some, wizard.
I can't hear you down there.
It's the polish of an audio drama, but not even we know what's going to happen next.
Roll for power, Masha.
What is it? Polcarella.
An epic audio quest to tell the best story possible in every genre imaginable.
Embark now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your app of choice.
I've always believed that all those romantic stories where you just meet that special someone and the world just changes are just another capitalist scam. But our story is not one meant for Facebook walls or Twitter threads or big budget Yankee Hollywood movies. This way, when I find you, you'll have records of all the times I thought of you. Isn't that romantic? Hazel, I can't wait to kill you. You're a god. If I pray to you, would you like it? Is that what I need to do to see you again? It wouldn't be the first time that I'm on my knees for the interest. Shit. I look back at the rest of the objects and I can hear the voices inside me, inside my chest, my head, my stomach. Read me, touch me, lean in. When I stare at the cup, there is just silence. When I wrap my hands around it, I expect the wax to burn me, but it is lukewarm, it's pleasant. I lift it and I drink it. Drink, drink, drink.
Dose After You. Find it wherever you listen to podcasts.
Lamplight Radio Play is an anthology podcast adopting the short horror fiction of Lamplight Magazine. Our stories are spooky, unsettling, and a slow burn. And to show you what we're about, we present this 2-minute short, A Talk with the Falling Girl.
Okay, this is an EVP. It's June 21st, 12:55 a.m. We're at the former site of the Oakdale Mansion. As an attempt at using Jamie's EMF booster, we're going to try to summon the apparition of what locals call the fallen girl. Guys ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready. Here we go. We're running. Battery's at 95%. You guys see that, right?
Call the fire department. Did you call the fire department? Hello, there are people still in there. Call the fire department. Is she talking to us? Is that a cell phone?
Not a phone.
We need to get to a phone. Hey, it's okay.
Jamie, turn it off.
The fire's over. It's all done. Everyone inside, where is everybody? Don't worry. It's over. You can calm down.
Dude, turn it off!
We're down to 40% already.
What about Jake? Jake Haddon. He's really tall and he's skinny. He's got black hair tied in a ponytail. Look, I know it was scary, but everything's okay now. No. Jake was with me in the attic. The only way he could have gotten out is if he had jumped and you would have seen him. It's okay. It's all over now.
15%.
It's a yes or no question. Was anyone else stuck in that house?
Everybody's okay. Everybody made it out.
You are a fucking liar.
Hey, are you okay?
Yeah.
She touched you, right?
Touched you?
She did.
Holy crap!
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Did we got that?
Oh my God. Yeah, we got it. I don't know at what expense, but yeah, we got it. Oh God, that poor girl.
How long till we try again?
Never, ever.
Come on.
Lamplight radio play. Quiet horror. Unsettle your ears.
Sure I can't get you a drink?
They'd had a moment, hadn't they? That afternoon when Garrett had smiled just like this, warm-eyed and amused in a way that made Tony want another cigarette, but also want to step forward and...
Hey, Kate, what are you writing? Ah!
New text post on Thursday, May 21st.
Title: Why You Should Be Watching Selkirk. So, Selkirk fandom, who wants to read my 5,000-word essay, Garrett, last name, Secret Werewolf?
I'm Kate, by the way.
They kissed?
I think I lucked out when I found Selkirk. Because if I'd loved something else, I would have made friends, and I would have been able to read a ton of great stories. But this way, I met you. Me and Day You, a new story about love and fandom from the Procyon Podcast Network.
Hi, this is Alexander, one of the members of the team bringing you the PodTales programming you just listened to. PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative fiction podcasting. This means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted, the episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. But in order to make all of that happen, we need support from fans, creators, and listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gets you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, updates from PodTales headquarters, and more. Check out the goals on the page for some cool plans we have coming soon. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of fiction podcasting. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thank you.
I saw a war coming. It's the Dead Eyes.
Dead Eyes will never beat visionaries. That's how evolution works.
It doesn't matter why I did it. You are standing here because of it.
Me! This is my assignment. You work under me.
Rebel against the Archseer.
Stop saying what you can't and start doing what you can. I'm not running.
If they rebel, we will win.
Ash to flame!
Flame to ash!
Visionaries, an audio drama, wherever you listen to podcasts.
I think... yeah, it'll be great.
Oh, most definitely.
I mean, what is this? Once a year, we come together for celebration. We come together for discussion. We come together for... What else do we come together for?
Fun? Yeah. That's part of celebration, isn't it? Transfiguration?
No.
Revision? Refinement? Revolution? Development? Exploration?
Yes. Exploration, thank you. We come together for exploration. After all, we exist whether we like it or not, and we do not exist alone whether we like it or not.
As big as the world is, it's still very small.
Yes, the sea even more so. So vast and deep that to ponder its depths for too long is known to cause feelings of existential dread. What lies beneath? As vast as the ocean is, how vast and varied are those who call it home. Celebration, discussion, exploration, that's why we're here. The mermaid, beautiful and terrifying. That's why we're here. But to celebrate the mermaid, must we isolate them in the process?
No, and I don't think anyone is asking you to.
Yeah, but mermaids are why we're here.
Yes, and they are here. Plus, I mean, it makes sense. They have lives.
They do have lives. And in those lives, they exist, and they do not exist alone, so... yeah, it'll be great.
Oh, most definitely.
That was...
Dallas Wheatley as the reassuring friend.
And Sade Oyamakinwa as the worrier. Sound design by Chroma. Come on in, the water's fine. Season 2. Mermaids and other monsters. 4 different episodes. 4 different conversations. Join us Wednesdays in May. Listen on Spotify, Radio Public, Podchaser, and many other wonderful podcatchers. We'll see you soon.
Enter the Dreamnasium, a world of science and fiction without limits, where humanity has spread among the stars.
Mama used to say the universe was a wheel, with Terra Primus at the center and alternate Terras spread along the spokes.
Do you know, in my youth, I dreamed of this place. A place of stars above and below. A place of darkness and beauty.
I have left your atmosphere. Proceeding to rendezvous point.
You going to be able to handle this? On your own, I mean.
Where mystery and intrigue meet.
I've never had anyone look at me that way before. Like you recognize me. And I sort of feel the same, but we've never met.
Hold on. We're tracking something. Target inbound at 0.58 luminal. Think it's your friends?
They're not my friends. They're not anyone's friends.
This is Terra Nova 3 bug. I wait too long, I stay open too long, I'm dead.
Filled with denizens who delight and despair.
You have got to be kidding me with these heels. And this body? Have you seen this?
It's a little hard to miss, kid.
Okay, so what do we know?
He likes red? To wear, I mean, just red, neck to heel.
We see you. Your life, your solitude must be crushing. Even for one such as you.
Where just surviving can be a struggle.
Faster than anyone I've ever seen.
That's no. How can that be?
I just know I'm in danger. I've been followed, you see. Men in dark suits with dark cars.
They're hurting me. Well, they're in for a shock. I don't get scared, I get cold inside. And then someone gets hurt.
Pendant Productions proudly presents a new sci-fi anthology show, Jeffrey Thorne's Dreamnasium, on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and more. Or download directly via pendantaudio.com.
This is so exciting. Aren't you excited?
It is a very promising development.
You scared?
No. Luke led me down to I don't know where. As we left the pitch black of the stairs, we met a long corridor, wide enough for wheeling parts to the elevator at the back. The sound changed. The street outside was muted. We lost the creaking of the ceiling. Instead, we could hear movement. Scratching of tiny nails, scampering to hide away from a foreign noise. We brought in breath and step and conversation in a place which had been silent for an age. Every room was dormant. The walls were concrete corner to corner. Indents were left on the ground where once was something heavy, now empty. Except one. After getting our bearings, we found an old office with a cracked leather couch. This was our spot. So we stopped. Sat down. Luke pulled out 2 bottles, and we toasted to our closed-down ghost town.
PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative audio fiction. That means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted. The episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. Free. But in order to make all that happen, we need support from fans, from creators, from listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gives you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, and more. We have some really exciting things planned. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of audio fiction. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thanks.
What is that?
That appears to be a twister! Made of snow and light?
But, is that even possible?
I don't think so, but it's happening anyway, and we're just gonna have to deal with it!
100 years after Dorothy's adventures, 2 cousins are swept from Kansas to a mysterious land.
Allow me to welcome you to the land of Oz.
Oz? Full of strange and wondrous people.
Call me Polina.
I'm tired of living on the streets.
I will not tolerate any rule breaking from you.
But they can't forget what they left behind.
My mom is the only person I have in the whole world right now. Right before I ended up here, she and I got into a big fight. I can't let that be the last time I spoke to her.
And their new companions have troubles of their own.
Am I to stay up here and rot in a city full of tinker toys that will break and have no one here to fix them?
This is the 4th school I've been to in a year. I keep having to switch so no one catches on that I'm a witch.
Jessica, you are not the only one with family to get back to.
Many trials lay in their path.
Beware the Wheelers?
What's a Wheeler? What makes it forbidden?
I don't want to find out! Go left!
And the way ahead is not always clear.
Don't you hammerheads get it yet? The wizard is gone. Glinda is gone. There's nobody left in Oz who can help you, and probably no one who wants to.
But hope is not lost.
There's no time to lose. It's very important that you get to Emerald City and ask for Ozma's help.
How do we start for Emerald City?
Why, the same way people have done it for hundreds of years. Hit the bricks.
Hit the Bricks is a radio play set in the land of Oz. Subscribe at a podcatcher near you and follow us on twitter.com at hitthebrickspod. Transcripts are available at hitthebricks.com.
Reeling up into it, all you gotta do is hit the bricks. I know that you can do it. Hit the bricks.
Who will you find on the Chimera?
A light-eating
Space monster?
A 7-foot-tall heretical catman.
The human hacker, gadgeteer, and technophile.
A galactic lawyer from the wrong side of the Akashic Bleed.
A living financial instrument.
Sort of like a rhino centaur, almost.
Hamster people?
Chinchilla people.
Chinchilla people, excuse me.
The Bog Witch of Zed.
The Honorable Lord Mayor.
A bright red, mustachioed land manatee.
Technicolor werewolf guys.
Janelle Monáe.
Yeah, she's Janelle Monáe. Exactly. This is the halfling Janelle Monáe.
The Chimera. Unexpected characters in unlikely situations.
This is Just Press Playhouse.
Wind the watch now, son. We'll help you defeat him.
You can't keep me away from him. I am Animal Caracas. I am more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Stay away from our son, you bastard.
No, impossible. Where is his power coming from? It's not supposed to be this way. The Sunstone is mine.
This is the power of love.
You're out of time, Caracas. You can't get rid of me forever. I'll find a way back to your dimension. I'll be back for you.
Me and my watch will be here waiting.
Ah! The light! It's tearing me apart!
Go home and let me sleep. I'll talk to you mañana.
But, Carmelita, she's so sad. Abuelo said they canceled Christmas this year.
What? Christmas is canceled? Who says?
Abuelo.
You don't think Santa wouldn't do that, would he?
All I know is Santa needs light to show him the way to all the boys and girls on Christmas Day. And if there ain't no luces, not even a spark, then Christmas in Borinquen will be sad and dark.
I'm sorry, I was curious. Here, take the doubloon back.
It's too late. Because you took the kiss and the coin, you are now cursed for the rest of your days. You will never experience love again. And wherever you go, people will revile you, spit at you. They'll want to hurt you, and you shall have to do unspeakable things to survive. The only way to remove the curse is to throw your coin into this well. Good luck finding it again.
And just like that, she was gone.
Yo! I was listening by the doorway the whole time, girl. That was badass. You told him where to stick it.
I think I'm gonna throw up.
That's just the adrenaline. I feel the same way every time I'm on stage.
I've been on stage plenty, remember?
And you will again, which is why I made you these.
What is it?
Ballet shoe balloons. To remind you to keep dancing. Keep chasing your dreams.
Thanks, Finn. You chase your dreams down, too.
Where are they, Pop? Where does he keep them?
There will be great tribulation unmatched from the beginning of the world until now and never to be seen again.
Pop? Pop! Where does he keep them, huh? Tell me, where are they?
Door. In the back. There's a cellar.
See? That wasn't hard. Could have avoided this whole mess.
Verily I say unto you, lest these days be cut short, none of us will be saved.
Yeah, we'll just have to figure out a way around that too.
I notice that your first destination is Arabella, but that's not on your way.
It's the first destination the writer went to. It's sacred.
Oh, how excited are you? On a scale of 1 to 10.
1 billion.
I thought the waters at Coast Venus were clear. That's something else.
Visitors. Of course.
You're Captain Valeria, right? Of the Ultramarine?
Yup, that's me. And that's her, the Ultramarine.
Sentimentality is a virtue of ours. It is ingrained in our people.
I'm sure such a thoughtful gift will cheer her right up.
One of the most important people we have to meet is in Arabella.
Who was this person?
No one knows, actually.
Signed Venus, Part 1. Listen on May 27.
Do you two know anything?
Hi there, this is Jordan Stillman, one of the members of the team bringing you the PodTales programming you just listened to. PodTales is committed to free, accessible programming to explore and celebrate the art of creative audio fiction. That means our live panels are captioned and ASL interpreted, the episodes in our podcast feed have accessible transcripts, and all our programming is free. But in order to make all of that happen, we need support from fans, creators, and listeners like you. If you can, the best way to help PodTales grow is through a monthly contribution over on our Patreon page. Any amount that you can offer gets you year-round access to our Discord server, early access to episodes, updates from PodTales HQ, and more. Check out the goals on the page for some cool plans we have coming soon. Head on over to patreon.com/podtales to make your contribution today. Help us keep PodTales free and accessible, and help us celebrate the incredible world of audio fiction. Again, that's patreon.com/podtales. Thanks.
Ragged Foils presents The Art of Ambition by Mark L. Burrow.
So, I stand behind this desk, I'm taught to myself, and turn around, talk to the clock. The clock. My only friend. Let me take you back to my great-grandfather's era. Fredo, get them a drink. It's on me. The funny thing about sitting at the counter, you get to eavesdrop. The whole thing is a mystery, he told me. How one guy could turn up each day, earn the respect of his customers, then simply disappear into thin air.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Mr. Austin I. Mumbo!
Cheers.
What were you doing in March? I don't remember either. Oh, that's right. I was listening to the Deck the Halls with Matrimony quarantine special, The Midnight Society.
I don't know any good ghost stories.
Then tell a movie.
Can't we just watch a movie?
I'm sick of Netflix. It's not romantic and it's not very Christmassy, but it is fun.
This is way better than ghost stories, my girl.
Stop. Just 20 solid minutes of your pals from Regal Bride hanging out and telling stories.
I'm not telling you.
Oh, God, if you don't tell me right now this minute.
I don't even like his voice.
It's the podcast equivalent of a big plate of tater tots and ketchup. So, it's pretty good.
Lie.
Deck the Halls with Matrimony quarantine special, The Midnight Society. Available now on your favorite podcast app or at Apple Podcasts.
This is a Ninth World Journal. A careless experiment with a teleportation device has left me stranded in random places throughout the Ninth World. While trying to survive in these strange lands, I must find a way to reverse my condition.
A Ninth World Journal is a science fantasy audio drama podcast. Subscribe to listen or visit ninthworldjournal.com.
So, hit anyone with lightning recently?
Oh, you're such a delight to talk to, my dear. No, I have not hit anyone with lightning recently. But I always enjoy our conversations.
You are Corey, then?
Yeah. Have we met?
Oh, so you're Corey. No wonder he was so I mean, Corey or not, you are not permitted entrance to the underworld by order of Hades.
Away walks a perfectly good mind already spoiled by my charming brother. What a pity.
Welcome to PodTales 2020. I'm Jeff Andreessen, one of the organizers of PodTales. We're so excited to be putting on programming devoted exclusively to imaginative audio storytelling throughout the month of November. Today, we'll be treating you to the panel Selling Your Show. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a stacked panel, and I'm really excited to hear what these folks have to say. At the top of this program, we would like to offer a land acknowledgement, a statement that pays respect to the indigenous people who live here and who had their land stolen from them by colonizers. It is only the first barest step in what we can do to support indigenous people today. The following acknowledgement of what to keep in mind as we participate in this digital space is written by Adrian Wong of Spiderweb. Since our activities are shared digitally to the internet, let's also take a moment to consider the legacy of colonization embedded within the technology, structures, and ways of thinking we use every day. We are using equipment and high-speed internet not available in many indigenous communities. Even the technologies that are central to much of the art we make leave significant carbon footprints, contributing to changing climates that disproportionately affect indigenous people worldwide. I invite you to join us in acknowledging all of this, as well as your shared responsibility to make good of this time, and for each of us to consider our roles in reconciliation, decolonization, and allyship. For more information on ways to help and causes you can contribute to, please visit our website. Next, I would like to thank our sponsors, Sarah Lawrence College and the Sarahs, Fool and Scholar Productions, Fable and Folly, Sleep With Me, Dagaz Media, and Winter Hill Brewing Company. These are major contributors who help sustain PodTales 2020 and allowed our show to continue virtually this year. Learn more on our website sponsor page. PodTales 2020 is completely free. We believe in making the resources we're creating available and accessible to all. If you like what we're doing here and you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/podtales. ASL interpretation for this session will be provided by Brandon C. Kazan-Maddox of Body Language Productions. Learn more about Brandon's work at brandonkazan/maddox.com. Please feel free to use the chat feature here on YouTube to say hello and ask a question of our panelists today. I'll be keeping an eye on the conversation and we'll pose a few of these questions to the group before the end of the hour. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Julia Schifini, a historian, voice actor, sound designer, and lover of all fancy foods. She is a co-host and producer of Spirits, a co-host of Join the Party, and the community manager of Multitude. She loves world building, professional wrestling, fancy cheese, and all things creepy and cool. You can hear her sound design on podcasts like Janus Descending and Primordial Deep, and voice acting on Tides and What's the Frequency. Take it away, Julia.
Hello, welcome to Selling Your Show. I'm really excited to be here and to talk to our panelists here on PodTales. I'm going to go ahead and introduce them. We'll start with Ella Watts. Ella is a podcast producer at BBC Studios, where she works across a range of podcast and radio content. She's also an audio fiction expert and advocate, best known for a landmark survey of the independent fiction podcast industry that was commissioned by BBC Sounds in 2018. Ella has worked across a range of independent podcasts and events, including Wooden Overcoats, The Unseen Hour, London Podcast Festival, and Pod UK. She is an executive producer for the Orphans podcast, as well as Paul Bay, who is an award-winning creator, writer, and director of The Black Tapes with Terry Miles, and the Big Loop solo podcast, named Apple Podcast Best of 2015 and Best of 2018 in the US, respectively. Recognized in the Austin Film Festival and Movie Maker Magazine's 25 screenwriters to watch in 2019, with 3 television sales under his belt, including the much-lauded sale of The Black Tapes in the Room to NBC, and his multi-series deal with Spotify. Paul has a successful track record of pitching audio fiction podcasts and TV properties to major studios and networks, so we're really, really lucky to have him. Also introducing Jordan Cobb, who is a New York City-based actress and writer. She's the creator of No Such Thing Productions. Jordan has written and starred in the sci-fi horror series Janus Descending, the fantasy comedy Here Be Dragons, and the high seas adventure thriller Primordial Deep. She has written for Fable and Folly's Alba Salix, Long Story Shorts Unseen, and the Paragon Collective's The Oyster. As an actress, Jordan has been featured in over 4 dozen audio dramas and has been the voice behind several audiobooks and is an accomplished stage actress as well. And finally, introducing Ann Heppermann, who is the founder of the Sarah Awards, which celebrates and rewards radio drama of the 21st century, as well as encourages producers to push the boundaries of audio fiction. She's been working in audio for nearly 20 years and received numerous awards, including a Peabody. In 2011, she was named a United States Artist Rockefeller Fellow. Actually, I worked at the Rockefeller Center. Congratulations. A dedicated educator, she has been teaching audio fiction at Sarah Lawrence College and its writing program since 2011. She's also hosted the fiction podcast Serendipity and is currently an executive producer for Audible. Bitch Magazine called her a sort of goddess of podcasting, which is an incredible title. Thank you all for joining me. I'm really, really excited to start our conversation.
Happy to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So as we all know from being a part of this community and from the incredible panels and discussions that PodTales has been hosting, independent audio fiction is currently really thriving, but breaking into larger networks can allow creators to access things like funding, marketing channels, and production resources on an entirely different scale. So I think the question on a lot of creators' minds is, how do you break into the world of like professional networking and pitching big businesses, which is a great place to start with this panel. So is it a matter, panelists, of waiting for an opportunity to come along? Are there ways of being proactive? Do you recommend just cold emailing companies and networks and shooting your shot? Or is that a super major faux pas? Anyone can go for it.
I'll go ahead and start. And I have a lot of different hats. I'm putting on my Audible hat right now. And so I would say, as an independent producer, one of the best things that you can do is to first get to know the content of whoever you're pitching to, the audio fiction content. I think that's really key. So I would say first, if you're pitching to a major network, whether it be Audible or Spotify or another place, try to get to know their catalog. And then one trick that I always did as well is like listen to the credits. When you hear names of people who are involved, say at that network, and if there's something like, you can find them and look up their email. People can email me with their audio fiction project. So I'll make my email available to Julia after this. So I think that's one way to do it. Some places will actually have a pitch portal, that's just available for blind pitches. Audible has that. I don't know about Spotify or other places. And then I would say, if you're at a place or a conference and you meet somebody, definitely keep their card and like take advantage of those kind of opportunities. But I would say the big thing is to try to get to know the company that you're pitching to first and be excited about pitching to them.
That's a great point. And specifically being excited about that pitch for that company, try not to keep it as general as possible, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've found, to Anne's point, that when you are going to conferences and that sort of a thing, networking is actually really, really helpful in just starting those conversations. Because it can be very hard to get your foot in the door. But so long as you are mingling with people and mixing in a way that's not, because I know networking gets sort of a bad rap, or it can at times. So when you're having these conversations with people, approaching it first of all, peer-to-peer is really, really helpful so that you're speaking to people on the same professional level, but also not approaching the conversation as a, what can you do for me? But genuinely taking an interest in these people and the work that they are doing, because building those initial relationships can help you to get very far along in the process. So whenever you do have the opportunity to meet people, take advantage of that if you can, because you never know who may be able to help you or who may suddenly come to you with an idea of their own. And that's how we start building these bridges.
I think on Jordan's point about what can you do for them, I consulted with the commissioning team at BBC Sounds for about a year, and a thing that was sometimes frustrating was that people who were pitching to us didn't really seem to recognize that in the case of BBC Sounds, the BBC is funded by taxpayers and it has a responsibility to represent the British public in theory. And BBC Sounds, the entire reason it was founded was to access like 16 to 35-year-olds who the BBC wasn't currently accessing. We had a lot of people pitching pitches that were directed at a much older audience because they wanted to make that. And it was like, well, you need to understand that we have a responsibility to do our job, and our job is to reach these people, and your pitch is explicitly not going to do that. So that's immediately a very easy way to take you off the list. So I think, yeah, that part is so important. And I also want to add that there is a difference between acquisition and commission. I think a lot of indie podcasters have this dream that, you know, Spotify or Audible is going to acquire their existing podcast and then just pay them to do whatever they want for the rest of time. And tragically, it's a little bit of a kind of Machiavellian game. Unfortunately, we live in a capitalist hellscape. And so, like, there's kind of a judgment call you have to make between creative control and getting financing from a big company. If you're going to try and ask for a lot of money or a lot of resource from someone, you have to face the reality that you might not have complete control over what that idea is. And the thing is that with companies, I mean, I'm in the UK, so I'm sure my fellow panelists can speak better to the US, but in the UK, our commissioning platforms, such as they are not interested in acquiring existing podcasts unless those existing podcasts are bringing in, you know, the insane numbers, that like the Conan O'Brien numbers. And the thing is that it's unlikely that an indie fiction podcast has that kind of scope, so they probably aren't going to acquire you. That said, your podcast is valuable as essentially a living business card. I mean, I know Andy Goddard says this all the time about Wooden Overcoats, is that this was his introduction to the industry. It's a valuable, wonderful thing, and if it gives you creative fulfillment, that's perfect. But just know that when you're approaching commissioners, they want something tailor-made for what they need. Like Jordan said, what can you do for them as well as what can they do for you?
Just going to follow up on Ella's point that your indie audio drama in the way it exists right now is your business card. All the opportunities I've had at selling ideas, original ideas for new podcasts, have come through my agents. So most of the major agencies in the US, particularly Los Angeles, have podcast departments where they actively seek out new creators, new voices, but they're all from different worlds. They're not audio drama people who've joined these agencies. They're TV people usually who've joined these agencies. So it's contingent, I think, on us, people like me, who've had the potent confluence of like privilege, opportunity, and luck to get in early. It's contingent on us to put indie creators on our agents map. So we need to constantly, like, they're not, audio drama Sunday hashtags are not going to get on our agents radar. We have to forward their stuff to them and say, hey, I know these people, they're great people, they're very collaborative, their stuff is amazing, you might want to look at this. And you know, I've been fortunate to have 2 people now on my agent's radar because of that reaching out, but you know, it's forwarding them 20, they might get 2. So and if all of us do it, it'll just, I'm trying to create this sense that it is a responsibility to those of us who got in early to do this type of thing, because it's not going to happen just as it is for indie creators.
Yeah, keeping the door open in order to allow other people to follow behind you is very, very important if you've already had those opportunities. Thank you, Paul. That is really, really a good reminder. So let's talk about, for instance, if a creator has been contacted by a company who's interested in having them pitch for it, or you get a response to a pitch that you have sent in. This person, let's say, hasn't had an opportunity like this before. So what materials should they be prepping? What is most important, and what is going to make them stand out the most?
So at least for me on the audio fiction front, I think a really good, like a pilot script, like it doesn't have to be recorded. And in fact, I would say don't record it, but you want something, even if it's just like a couple of scenes to show the writing, that's really important. I think a really good deck, you have to be able to prove that you've thought out this concept. So if you have a deck that lays out what's going to happen in the stories, that's really helpful. If you have an idea of who you want to potentially cast, that's also helpful in terms of showcasing that you've really thought out every single element of your show.
Yeah, I find that I like to have this is more in response to when you're pitching, say, to a grant or a contest or something of that nature. The more that you have of your concept just sort of ready to go, or at least ready to show someone if they ask for it, like a script, like a show Bible, or even brief character descriptions if they haven't already asked for these things, I find can be very helpful. I recently pitched a script for a grant, and they wanted to know who was going to be on our team. They wanted to know ideas of how the characters were going to look, that sort of a thing. If you have people that you work with and want to bring on board with the project, it helps to let the people on the other side of the table know that they have experience and what kind of experience they have. And if you can showcase that in any way, shape, or form, that can also be helpful. For example, I work with Daryl Banner. He is a very, very accomplished composer. He does all of the music for No Such Thing Productions and a couple of other indie shows as well. But he may not necessarily be someone that a lot of people in higher up casting and pitching positions know. So I asked him if he would create a piece of music to go along with the pitch for me to send along, which wound up being very helpful because that not only lets the people across the other side of the table know that you, one, know what you're doing, and that you're prepared, but also that the people that you're working with and want to bring on board are people that they can trust to do the job that they need to have done.
That's smart. That's I'm gonna write that down. That's in my next pitch.
I got Paul to write something down. I'm done. I'm satisfied now.
I'm curious if budget comes into play this early on in the process. Is that something that someone like Anne or Ella that you are expecting to see early on in the process, or is that something that you would figure out later?
For me, it would really depend on the show. Like I was gonna say with pitching that, again, knowing your studio, knowing your commissioner is very important. But if you're pitching to kind of like a high budget commissioner, like for example Spotify, that it can be very helpful to give them suggested casting, famous person here, even if you don't have that person attached to the project, just because it helps them imagine how it will kind of stand against their lineup and how it will fit into their sort of portfolio. Obviously, however, if you choose to suggest that you are going to cast like high profile talent, they're going to cost a lot more money than kind of like newer and up and coming actors. So you kind of have to play a bit of a game of like getting them a little bit interested so that they don't just see a very big figure and go, no, thanks, never mind. And kind of recognizing flexibility. So being like, you know, I could make this show for like X much money, and I know in my head that I could make it for actually this small amount, but I'm going to pitch to them kind of like in the middle, and I could do it higher if we had really big talent and we could make it all fancy for you. And so I think that there's like, I don't think it's a good idea to commit to a specific budget, but I also think that it can be helpful if they're interested and if they start having that conversation to say, yes, I've worked out the costs. Here are what the costs would be. These are the things that we think would vary depending on talent. I also just want to kind of caveat there as well, in terms of like keeping doors open, and with Jordan's point about like including work, I find it very helpful when I'm suggesting indie podcast talent to sort of briefly contextualize them in a sentence or two. And it can be very helpful to contextualize yourself and also be aware that no one will oversell themselves as much as a straight cis white man. And so like you can overblow it. You don't have to say, oh, well, my podcast only had 100 downloads on this special episode we did. That's not helpful. But you can say it's critically acclaimed because there is an article about it that did critically review it well. And you're allowed to just say my critically acclaimed podcast, or my very popular podcast here, or this podcast that has been performed in London in front of X hundred people, etc., or X thousand people. And I think that when it comes to things like talent and budget, it's kind of good to sort of, sorry, I feel like I'm getting so close to saying just lie, but that's not what I want to say. I think it's important to sort of hedge your bets. From a commissioning perspective, if you suggest a brand new writer they've never heard of, or a brand new actor they've never heard of, and you say, I want a David Tennant budget to pay this person who you've never heard of before, then for them, that's kind of just doesn't make any sense. But if you say, I think this person would be great, I think that we could make this within your budgets for your fees, then you kind of have a little bit of room to negotiate. You have room to negotiate a good fee or a better fee for your performers and your creative talent. And you also have the option to kind of say, well, yeah, if you want David Tennant in the podcast, then you're going to have to give us David Tennant's fee because like we can't afford him. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, and I think that's really smart. And kind of to reiterate what Jordan was saying, a lot of times when it comes to budgets, people will come in like, what can you do for me? And they're coming in sometimes with that mindset at the wrong point, where, you know, part of what you're doing. So the first suggestion I would have is don't just send a budget with your pitch. I would say never send a budget unless you are asked for a budget. That's the first just kind of hard and fast rule. You should have a budget in mind, and you should be able to show that you know what it takes to make an audio fiction project with your budget, because that is something that people will use in terms of evaluating, does this person know what they're doing? And then the other thing I would say is that at a large company, a lot of times you will be working with people whose job is to help you, and they're your cheerleaders, and they're there to figure it out. So you don't want to see them, you know, as the objective enemy at first. You know, that happens more, I would say, in the contracting phase. Like, I would say when you're working on your budget, when you're working with people, there are people designated to be your cheerleaders, because there is a process by which, and I'm assuming, Ella, you can speak to this as well, where they internally have to take this project up the chain of command and convince people. So these are the people who are on your side, and they're the ones who will be very hopefully honest with you about what the usual kind of budget is for the production, whether or not they can help you cast the David Tennant, things that they think will help get your pitch to green light, to a yes, so that, because it looks good for them. If they have a pitch, if they believe in you and your project, it looks good for them. They want it to succeed. So I feel like sometimes what happens, particularly when people don't have agents, because I think that's where agents know the game. And a lot of times I don't think independents know the game, and that puts them at a disadvantage. So they don't know when to play hardball and when the person who is in that large capitalist corporate structure is actually there to help them. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Paul, I'm assuming you have experience with this in terms of, knowing who your cheerleaders are and knowing when to play hardball.
I don't play hardball because my lawyer and my agent does that. That's their job. And once the negotiations are done, for example, Spotify I sold in May of last year, and it didn't get green. Like the negotiations weren't done till January of this year. And that took a long time, and I wasn't even involved in that. That was just my lawyer going at it and my agents, and we'd conference call, and that's how that works. I could never have done that on my own. I ended up with a very, very good multi-series deal. And the part where you're talking about where I see my collaborators, they are my collaborators. We're trying to figure out with these executives the best version of my story. I know some people might go into this thinking, well, it's my story, right? I know how to tell my story, but they're also thinking of their market, they're thinking of their audience, and they're thinking of what will bring people to their platform, or what will attract advertising dollars. So you have to bring all that. It's like doing a TV series. So you have to see them as collaborators and not someone who's there to make it difficult for you. And it's always, knock on wood, it's always ended up in a better version of my story so far. So a faster paced story. I have a tendency to want to go slow. It's that horror writer in me. And some of them might say, we need something in the first 2 minutes. And sometimes I'll show you something. This data shows people turn it off in the first 2 minutes. I'm like, oh, that's just an example. I'm like, okay, I need to put something in there then. No, it doesn't change my story in the way I write it. Just something, a piece I have to move. So it's you have to go into these things, in my view, collaboratively, and don't see anyone as an opponent at all, because if you can't do this collaboratively, just stay independent. If you're not willing to just be collaborative, this is not the place where you want to be.
So we have talked about the mistakes that you're seeing creators do when they are pitching to a company. Are there any other big mistakes that people tend to make that you see repeated often?
Let your writer help write the pitch. I have read a couple of very bad pitches that just, the thing about a pitch is that it's less about maybe the technical specifications and more about getting someone who's really tired and has already read a bunch of them sitting at their desk to be like, oh, wow, that's so cool. I really want to hear that. Which means that the job of a pitch is more like advertising than it is kind of getting into the scaffolding of the project. The scaffolding of the project comes when a commissioner is talking to you about budgets, about pilots, is asking for details. But in the first instance, it really needs to be exciting. And on that note, I don't know how it works in the US, but in the UK, in the first instance, your pitch should be a maximum of 3 pages long. And I have read a 125-page script that someone sent because I am a nice person. and I agreed to read it. But good Lord, and immediately as soon as we saw that page count, it was like, great, we're not going to work with this person, and we're probably not going to work with them in the immediate future because they don't know what they're doing. And you just really have to think about that. It's much better to kind of hold things back and make someone go, oh, but what happens next though? But what is the secret? But please tell me the doctor's name. Than it is to kind of give everything away and then have them go, I feel like my ending would have been better. Tease them. Don't give them everything.
Yeah, your pitch is your hook, essentially. I feel like Ella just summed it up entirely perfectly. Also, most people who are reading pitches are not as nice as Ella. They will, following directions is one of the most important skills that you can have as a human being. Being able to follow directions ensures that you are more likely to be able to connect and get through to the person on the other side of the table. Most people, if they ask you for 3 pages and they see 5 pages and they see 125 pages, your pitch is going in the trash can, or as my mom likes to refer to it, the circular filing bin. A thing that I have done, a mistake that I have made in the past is timing. You need to stay on top of communicating with people who are on the other side of the table because, the artistic world moves very quickly. And the better you can be about communicating with other parties, the easier it is to actually move forward with projects. You don't want to have people waiting a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks or more. And this is something I'm still rather guilty of. So take this with a grain of salt, or rather, I speak from experience. So take it, deeply because I have done this in the past. But you definitely want to stay on top of these communications that you're having with other people. Because it's also a matter of respect. You want to respect the everyone within this process, no matter if you're speaking to a secretary or an intern, or if you're talking to the CEO of a company. You want to treat everyone with the same level of respect. That will get you very far.
And I think on that note too, maintaining good communication is really important. Also realizing that the person on the other side has a lot of pitches that they're going through. So you don't want to be emailing them every day, and be sure to ask them, if people are human beings and hopefully they will respond graciously. Just ask them when they should expect an answer, or if they needed reminding, you can email them again, like following up. And if you haven't heard from them in a while, it's totally fine to follow up. And know that just because something isn't happening right away doesn't mean that the person isn't interested in your project or excited about your project. They may think your pitch is so great and so well buttoned up that they don't have to worry about it because they're putting out other fires. So I would say, I know it's really hard to get out of your head after you've applied for something or pitched something, but try to get out of your head as much as you can.
Absolutely. I think now is a great time to kind of transition into like the actual acts of the pitching process, like being in the room, whether it is a physical room or a Zoom call, given the state of the world. And Paul, this is something that you have talked a lot about, kind of the pitching process and your successes and failures with it. For people who are intimidated by the idea of pitching to a big company like Spotify, what are your absolute must-dos, like kind of going into the room? What are your goals apart from, hey, get these people to like my idea enough to pay for it?
There's a couple of components. The first one is attitudinal. You can't go in thinking I'm here to sell something. I know we talk in those terms, but the attitude of actually pitching has to come from, I can't wait to entertain them with my story. because that's how they're going to hear it. They don't want to hear a sale. They want a story about a product. When they go back to their rooms to pitch it higher up the chain, I find in the US, that's what they want to hear or feel is a story that moves you. You always hear this term authenticity. You have to convince them not only that your story is something that they'll want to make and hear, you have to convince them you are the person to tell that story. That's what separates, I find, in my successful pitches, I always hear back from the executives, you convinced us that you're the exact person to tell this exact story. They hear a lot of great stories, but sometimes they're like, there's something about the person, they just came up with a story. Anyone could tell this story. So I don't know what that balance is, but that's the attitudinal part. The other part is in terms of specifics, rehearse it, time it, and thank God we have Zoom now, because when you're in the room, you have cards and you could feel everyone, their legs crossing, getting impatient. On a Zoom, don't be afraid to have your notes there. They don't mind you reading, but make sure it's a very compelling reading as you do it. I've seen people sell stuff, or heard of people sell stuff purely from reading a 15-page pitch. And then some people have memorized it, told it compellingly, and it got nothing. So they just want it, again, back to the attitudinal stuff. They want a good story that feels authentic, but don't be afraid to read it, because not everyone's a natural. You're not in this to tell an oral story all the time. You're a writer. A lot of these people, a lot of us are writers, so we're not performers. So don't be afraid. Just make sure, whether reading or memorizing, you rehearse it so it feels compelling. Oh, and keep it under 20 minutes.
Very important. I think that it's an interesting point to kind of talk about the idea that, like, listen, if you have the opportunity to do this, that is fantastic and you should seize it as much as possible. But the likelihood of your pitch being picked up on the first time you ever get to pitch to a room is unlikely. And that can be really disheartening for a lot of people who aren't super familiar with this process or who are going through it for the first time. Do you guys have advice on kind of bouncing back from a quote unquote failure?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think, so two things. I think that I think that we haven't mentioned yet, but I think is worth mentioning is sometimes, again, I don't know how it works in the US. In the UK, you might partner with a production company in order to pitch your idea to like a bigger commissioner, because by yourself, maybe you're not a producer, or like you don't have a lot of experience and you want to open a door that is normally closed. And on that note, like a lot of the time producers like me will be doing a lot of this on your behalf. So you're just kind of sitting there waiting for months. Point the first. When you are waiting for months, I am working for months and having many meetings and writing many documents. And I am not just sitting there going, ugh, so-and-so, I don't care about Eric. I'm not working with anyone called Eric, don't worry. So the first thing is, it's a thing I've been trying to get my head around, is stop trying to guess that you know what someone else is thinking, whether that's a producer or a commissioner. You come out of a meeting and you go, oh, well, I know that they hated it because the expression on their face when I said this sentence just means that, like, I fluffed it. That was the moment. It's all wrong. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know what's happening in their lives. You don't know who else they've met that day. You don't know what, like, the full behind the scenes strategy is. And all that imagining that is going to do is torture you. Like, worrying about it just makes it hurt twice. Do not try and figure out what someone else is thinking. You don't know. And then the second point is that if you are working with someone else, like a producer or just someone like a collaborator, talk to them about it and kind of like talk about, okay, could we do something differently? How did you feel about that? Did you feel good when we left that room? Do you think, like, even if we don't get it, we did our best? Or do you think that maybe we should have emphasized something different? generally speaking, getting a second perspective, I think, is really valuable. And whilst you can just keep banging doors down and sending the same exact thing to people, it can be useful to make small adjustments to your idea as you continue and try to see it as a learning process. Like my primary school headmaster used to say that there's no such thing as mistakes, only learning experiences. And it was primary school advice, but I do think it's true. Like there's no such thing as a bad idea or a bad pitch. All it is an opportunity to change and develop and grow your story. And that's exciting if this is a world and a story you want to live in. So, yeah.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Ella was saying, so at Audible, you would not be the person to pitch to the room. That would be my job. And so you would have the ability, and again, to Ella's point, I am working incredibly hard, having a ton of meetings with business people, budget people, marketing people, all kinds of people. So people are working really hard on your behalf. And if the pitch doesn't go through, it's totally fine to have a conversation as to why. They may not be able to reveal everything, just in terms of confidentiality when it comes to the company. And also know that sometimes when a pitch isn't taken, it isn't the fact that it's a bad pitch. It might not have been right at that moment. The company may have decided that they needed more romance rather than thrillers, or that they have too many true crime documentaries happening. And so there are lots of different things that are happening in the space that are not a reflection of your pitch or of your idea. And it is a learning process. And I would say that if people encourage you to continue to pitch, take them at their word. I would never tell anybody to pitch me again if I did not mean it. So.
And having, just on like a personal level, some form of emotional support group, whether that is family members, close friends, other creatives who you trust, who can have your back in those moments when the pitch maybe doesn't go the way that you wanted it to, when you have an off day in the room, or when you get that bad news back from your agent or from the company directly, or if a project falls through, you want to have people within your own life beyond the business realm where you can express the full bent of your feelings, so that you can, you're allowed to have those moments of being disappointed and being upset. And you may not want to, rant about it on Twitter because, hey, that agent may still be following you on Twitter and you don't want to, go and badmouth them all over the internet or something like that. But if you have a space that is your own where you can express yourself, that is a really healthy and good way to deal with those times when things can be really disappointing. Also, oops, sorry, there's a very loud truck going by. But one thing that I find helpful is knowing that creatives pitch things on varying levels throughout the entirety of your career. So you have experience in these rooms. You might not think it's the same experience, but if you apply for a contest, that is a pitch. If you apply for a grant, that is also a pitch. Your Indiegogo campaign is also a pitch. You are asking someone to help you to make your show. Just talking to your friends, over a drink about your show, or trying to get actors to come and audition. These are all different versions of pitches. And it's a good way to think of how you are shaping your show and the way that you are essentially marketing it to the people around you, to help you to build this new world that you want to put out into the universe. So the more often you can think of what you're creating as a pitch, something that you have to share with other people, it may help you just to be more comfortable when you are standing, in front of those like panels of people or sitting in the Zoom call, which feels much more pressureful and it can be very intimidating. But the more of a mindset you can give yourself that I've kind of done a version of this before might help you to settle into those rooms.
And following up on what Jordan just said about these multitudes of experience, I believe I've experienced way more failure than success. I can count on my hands how many successes I had. I don't know how to count how many failures I've had. And when you go in, again, attitudinal, you can't think of yourself as I'm a person with this one story. You're a storyteller. You have lots of stories. You have to think, well, because I've got this one story that no one bought. And if I tied myself to that story, it would destroy me. I would not want to, when the last outlet got rejected, I just folded it up and said, well, that was fun writing that and pitching it. But I got invited back to pitch half those people, my next thing. So, I just remind myself, I got more stories. It can't be that one. If you just, don't cut yourself off. Don't cut off your own potential by tying yourself to any particular thing.
I love that. Thank you, Paul. One last question, and then we will get to audience questions. Contracts, we talked about them a little bit earlier, but what to look out for, where to find legal advice, how to protect your best interests. Any thoughts on contracts before we wrap up?
As soon as you take money from people, they are taking a stake of your IP. So again, in terms of working with production companies, if you're going to pitch, like if you pitch something to me as a producer at BBC Studios, but then you want my company to pay you £1,000 or £2,000 to write a big long pitch document, you have to recognize and read in your contract that as soon as we give you money, we consider that to be investing in developing that idea, which means we are buying a stake in it. So you really need to think personally and consult with friends and colleagues about kind of where you want to go with this idea. Do you want to take it to lots of different people? In which case you might need to spend more time on it yourself before you start asking for money. Do you just want to use it as an excuse to work with X production company or to throw something at X commissioner? Okay, fine. Just ask them for money straight up if you know that you're fine with giving that away. But just be very aware that in the simplest terms, as soon as someone gives you money, you are exchanging that for ownership of IP.
And I think know that IP is negotiable in terms of how much IP. So there's always like a range, in which you can negotiate. I would say make sure you have a lawyer who has worked in the space, not just in the entertainment space, because I would say the audio fiction space is different from the entertainment space. And I've seen independents who have bad lawyers and who actually gum up the negotiation process because the lawyer doesn't know what they're doing. So I would recommend talking to people who've had successful pitches with that company to ask about who is your lawyer, how did the negotiations go, what's your IP. I think, and as Paul pointed out, I think it's our duty, if you've had something created, to try and be transparent about that and those things, because those are the things that we can help each other out with when it comes to contract negotiation. You don't want to ask a complete and utter stranger that question. It's like I can't remember when this happened, but it's like there are certain questions, like as a teacher, it's a bit of a faux pas for somebody who I don't know to ask me for my syllabus, right? And one thing that I also learned is that you don't just ask somebody like, can you put me in touch with your agent? Like that can be, right, Paul? That's like a faux pas. Like, and yeah. So there are certain like social norms when it comes to these things. So I think, if you get to that stage, and you have a relationship with people who have gotten to that stage as well, I would say reach out to them and ask those questions.
The Writers Guild of America, I know, will sometimes do consultations on contracts. They are incredibly, incredibly helpful in that area. I have partially forgotten the beginning of this question.
Contracts, what to look for, where to find legal advice, how to protect your best interests.
Gotcha. I had another point. I've forgotten what it was.
All right.
So I will pass it off to Paul, and hopefully I will remember.
Oh, sorry, Jordan, I'm not going to give you much time because I don't have much except don't negotiate on your own. Get somebody. Keep in mind what Anne said about don't just get any entertainment lawyer. And when you get that lawyer or agent, which is even better because if you have a lawyer and agent and you have your agent first and then get a lawyer, your agent can tell your lawyer what your goals are because they already know, right? So when you're negotiating, like it's the nature of IP with audio fiction now, a lot of these platforms, not everyone, but a lot of these platforms and studios are already thinking of the end game of let's turn it into a TV or a movie. And so you need to let your reps know what your stake is. Like, do you want a piece of that? Do you want to help write the TV version or the movie version? Because if so, it changes the negotiation. You could even tell them, give them a bit more what they want, but give me a bit more of the TV side, right? So they know what to play with. That helps a lot.
I did remember what it was.
There it is.
You need to read the contract. If you have an agent, if you have entertainment lawyers, that's great. You, as the individual who has a stake in this, you have to read your own contract. And if there is absolutely anything that you don't understand, you need to ask so that you can understand absolutely every single aspect of that contract. Because it's a piece of you. You know, your work is a piece of you, and signing your name to a piece of paper that you don't understand every aspect of what is written down there can be a very, very dangerous thing, and you can lose a lot more than you bargained for. No matter how good something looks or how good someone tells you something is, you need to understand what's on that piece of paper. It's the most important piece of contract negotiation, in my personal opinion, is having a fundamental understanding of what you're looking at and what you're dealing with.
I know I already spoke and that we're short on time. I will be brief. Jordan reminded me, in the UK, we don't have Writers Guild of America, but we do have BECTU, which is a broadcasting union, which a couple weeks ago opened a podcast branch, which does similar consultations, but in the UK. So if you're in the UK in this situation, check out BECTU Podcasters Union. Sorry.
No, thank you. That was a really, really helpful resource. I think we are now ready to take some audience questions. Jeff, if you could provide us with some audience questions.
I'd be happy to. We have quite a few because you guys are resources of knowledge and information. The first question is kind of picking up on where the conversation just was. When should you keep your show independent versus when should you be okay with selling it? Any advice on that?
That seems like a really personal choice. You know, I think to Ella's point, once you say take a lot of money, you know, from someone, they have a stake in the project as well. So I think you just have to figure out kind of what you're willing to negotiate personally and what you're willing to, I hate to say the phrase give up. So Paul, correct me, can you think of another phrase when it comes to giving up something when you're selling your show to such a large company rather than putting it out as an independent?
Compromising.
Compromising.
That's the way I justify it to myself, by the way. But I think this is going to sound so hokey, but it works for me. You always have to remind yourself why you're doing this. If it's the creation of something that's exactly the way you imagine it, if that is what brings you joy, stay independent. My goal was, what brings me joy is making a living doing something I love, which is writing. And so what I'm doing is bringing me joy. If producing exactly what's in my head and I'm hearing it out, I would never try to sell it. Try to get funding from someone who's willing to invest in exactly what I want to do, which is going to be impossible to find. So you gotta hone in on that. Then this won't even become an issue.
Yeah, the clearer the idea of knowing exactly what it is that you want. I sat down a little while ago and I wrote out all of the goals that I have for my shows and for podcasting and for myself as an artist and a creator. And I sat down and I wrote all of those out. And then once you've kind of done that, you need to look and see, is this something you can do on your own and still have it pan out the way that you want it to? And this is all, knowing that life goes sideways sometimes. Not everything goes according to plan. But if you know what that North Star is, you'll find your way to it. It is entirely a matter of personal taste and what it is that you need at any given time. And that can change. It might be that you sign that contract and you think, this is exactly what I want. And then 5 years down the road, you're like, I want something new now. I want that freedom that comes with remaining independent. And you can change your mind and you can go back, depending on, whatever contracts you may have signed. Don't break your contracts. Once you've signed them, don't do that. It ends very badly, but pursue the things that you want in the way that it best suits you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Jeff, can we have one more question? There we go.
Sorry, I was having trouble getting off mute.
All right.
This is a somewhat specific question, and I don't want to commit Anne's faux pas and ask anything too direct, but people are wondering how you first get connected for folks with representation to an agent, how that process just works.
For me, it was the black tapes. This is why my first words were talking about opportunity and privilege and luck, a ton of luck, right? It was his assistant driving in LA who fell in love with the black tapes and then told his manager, his boss, who's quite powerful, about us, and he flew up to Vancouver to meet us. And then I got my agent when he heard me pitch something, and he was in the room. And he wasn't my agent, and they all said, "Get that guy." So it's you. As soon as you get a crack of an opportunity, you're on. Like it's if you're lucky, more opportunities follow. But you have to, again, just there is no one way to do. I've heard so many different. I've heard dozens of ways that people get an agent. But the best thing is just in the way the people I choose to help are ones who put out great audio fiction, excellent, like very original ideas, and there are very giving creators. Like I've seen them help others. That's who I like to help. If you're that type of person, just keep working and making your thing, and with a bit of luck, someone's gonna tap you on the shoulder and say, "Can I introduce you to somebody?" That's all I can offer.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is you can't get an agent and you can't kind of move on to that next step unless you're already creating content. No one is going to turn around and be like, "Oh, you have an idea for a thing that you haven't made yet and you haven't made anything else? Oh, okay, I'm your agent now." No, you have to be creating content and you have to be making stuff that is catching people's notice.
I think it's also worth noting that there is a difference between the US and the UK in this, with like one notable exception, and it was William Morris Endeavor in the US signing Rusty Quill. Michelle Steinberg Associates has signed a couple of UK people, but not many. And most of the time you can't get an agent for doing fiction podcasts in the UK yet. Don't give up hope. But generally speaking, what part of my job as a producer, if I'm working with someone, if we've got a contract for radio or TV, or if I know that they're currently pitching like a book, that's the point when I will suggest some agents I think they should work with before I offer them a contract, because I want them to be properly represented. But just know that if you're based in the British Isles, you probably are going to need to do something in another medium as well before you're going to be able to sign with an agent at this point in time.
Excellent. I think we are out of times in terms of more questions. So I'm just going to ask everyone, hey, tell people where they can find you and your work on the internet. Jordan, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yes. Okay.
I'm just picking the order in which I see you guys on screen. Go ahead.
Sure you are. You can find me on Twitter at Inkfemeral. That is INKPHEMERAL. It's ephemeral, but with the word ink in front of it, because I thought I was being clever. And you can find my shows at No Such Thing Productions. So that's Janus Descending and Primordial Deep. Our website is nosuchthingradio.com.
Awesome. Anne?
So we have the Sarah Awards, which is thesarahawards.com. We don't update a ton, but keep an eye out on that space. You can also find me on Twitter at my name, which is Ann Heppermann. You'll see a lot of retweets, political retweets, and retweets about my neighborhood, Jackson Heights. So just a warning there.
Ella?
So I'm at GEJ Golf Echo Juliet Watts WATTS on Twitter, and I recently, 5 years late, decided to actually start using Instagram. So follow me on there because I am trying to make it work.
Awesome. And Paul?
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Mr. Paul Bay, and if you want my jokes, Twitter. If you want my dogs and food, Instagram.
I highly recommend that Instagram account. And I am Julia Schifini on Twitter. That's just my name. And you can check out Multitude at multitude.productions. We have a bunch of podcasting resources available for free, including a breakdown of the budget that we used for our audio sitcom Next Stop. I think it is a particularly super useful resource, especially when talking about pitching your show, which is what this panel was all about. So thank you. And I'm going to throw it back over to Jeff.
Thank you all so much for being such fantastic panelists and for having such a wonderful conversation. It was really helpful. I'm sure people really appreciated it. The comments and questions were flying. So thank you so much. Thank you all for coming and listening and watching. This session is part of PodTales 2020, 3 weekends of programming brought to you in partnership with the Sarahs, the Sarah Lawrence College International Audio Fiction Award. For a full list of sessions, visit podtales.org. That's podtales.org. And be sure to subscribe to PodTales on the podcatcher of your choice to find the podcast showcase selections we'll be featuring from now to the end of the month on our feed. As a reminder, PodTales 2020 is completely free. We believe in making resources we're creating available and accessible to all. If you like what we're doing here, please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/podtales. Finally, we'd love to know what you think. You can find a panel feedback form linked both to the YouTube description below and over on the website event page. Please take a moment to fill that out and help us make PodTales better in the future. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.